My parents kicked me out for getting a job and not being able to babysit anymore, then lied to the whole family when asked about it. So I went nuclear and exposed them, and now they're trying to force me back because their new babysitter quit. 2 months after I turned 17, I got my first job. But when I told my parents about it, their literal first words were, "Who's going to babysit our kids?" I should have been shocked, but because I knew my parents, I wasn't. So I replied, "Well, who's going to pay for my college tuition?" I expected that to stump them. You see, they had repeatedly told me in the past if I wanted to go to college, I needed to pay for it myself. But instead of conceding, they started laughing like my response was the funniest thing in the world. You're a woman, and women should be grateful to take care of kids, whether it's free or paid. Of course, in my case, it was free. My dad then chimed in with some words of wisdom. "You don't just get to be selfish and abandon the family, Julia. Do you know how much a babysitter for 4 kids costs these days?" I tried to Parents kicked me out for getting a job and not being able to babysit anymore, then lied to the whole family when asked about it. So I went nuclear and exposed them, and now they're trying to force me back because their new babysitter quit. 2 months after I turned 17, I got my first job. But when I told my parents about it, their literal first words were, "Who's going to babysit our kids?" I should have been shocked, but because I knew my parents, I wasn't. So I replied, "Well, who's going to pay for my college tuition?" I expected that to stump them. You see, they had repeatedly told me in the past if I wanted to go to college, I needed to pay for it myself. But instead of conceding, they started laughing like my response was the funniest thing in the world. You're a woman, and women should be grateful to take care of kids, whether it's free or paid. Of course, in my case, it was free. My dad then chimed in with some words of wisdom. "You don't just get to be selfish and abandon the family, Julia. Do you know how much a babysitter for 4 kids costs these days?" I tried to compromise, to tell them that some of the money I made from work could go to them and the kids, but they didn't care. And to them, because I wasn't spending my life taking care of their kids, I deserved to be kicked out. They told me to pack my bags and leave. I just rolled my eyes in response. I ran upstairs, but as I did, for the first time in a very long time, I let myself feel it, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and most of all, the grief of knowing I'll never know a life where my parents love me. I didn't even bother wiping the tears away, just focused on stuffing as many clothes into a backpack as possible. After 10 minutes, they yelled at me to hurry up, and that's when we left for my cousins. On the way there, my parents kept trying to change my mind. My dad reminded me of how much my siblings loved me, or more specifically, how no one else could get them to stop crying like I can. Their manipulation wasn't even that good, but for some reason, I still felt bad. I started questioning if I really was selfish. My mom even started crying, not because she'd miss me, but because now they had to pay for a babysitter. So when we arrived at my cousin Megan's and they just drove off without saying goodbye, I felt even more guilt, especially when she opened the door, because her face immediately lit up with joy, and she gave me the first genuine smile I'd seen in a long time. Kindness felt so unfamiliar to me that as soon as we got inside, I immediately broke down in tears. Her face fell and she tried to console me. "Well, kinda. My love, why don't you just help your parents out a little?" Help? I've cut off friends, let my grades drop, sacrificed everything to constantly take care of their kids. I didn't mean to shout, but I couldn't help the anger inside me. I turned to face her with disgust at her suggestion, but that's when I saw a look of genuine shock on her face. "Your parents told me you were acting entitled and just didn't want to help out when you had nothing to do all day." I immediately started crying again, but this time it was in her arms. I told her the whole truth, why I ended up at her place, all while she held me and told me I would be safe under her roof. Surprisingly, she seemed anything but angry, but I would soon find out she was more than just angry. I ended up crying myself to sleep that afternoon. I didn't wake up until a few hours later when I heard Megan yelling. It was in the room next door. When I heard the anger in her voice, I sat up immediately. She was usually a very shy, timid person, so hearing her like this was super unusual. It was obvious that she was talking to my parents. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I could tell she was laying it on them. I remember feeling a genuine smile creep onto my face. It was the first time someone had stood up for me. When I heard her hang up, I lay back down and pretended to still be asleep. Not knowing I was awake, she started speaking out loud, something Megan hasn't done since I was a kid, but what she said made me shoot up. Apparently, my parents had already found a new free babysitter. They had one available all along. This whole thing was just a ploy to kick me out of the house and get me out of the hair once and for all. After saying all this, Megan sighed and said I deserved better before heading to bed. And that's when I sat up, because she was right. I did deserve better parents. And if I couldn't get it, then I at least deserved to have my get back. My plan was bulletproof. You know that one gossipy aunt every family has? Well, we have one too. And I texted her every tiny little juicy detail of everything that happened between me and my family. It ended up being a 1,400-word message. I immediately turned my phone off because I was terrified of the consequences. And the next morning, when I finally felt brave enough to turn it back on, my soul left my body. My phone was blowing up with notifications, not just texts from my gossipy Aunt Barbara, but from pretty much every family member I had contact info for. Apparently, Aunt Barbara had taken my 1,400-word text and forwarded it to everyone in the family group chat without a moment's hesitation. I scrolled through the messages with my heart pounding in my chest. There were dozens of them. Some people were defending my parents, saying I was just a dramatic teenager, but a surprising number were actually on my side. My Uncle Joseph wrote a whole paragraph about how disgusted he was with his sister, my mom, for treating me like a live-in nanny instead of a daughter. My grandma Elizabeth sent a message saying she was heartbroken and that she raised her children better than this. Megan came into the guest room where I was staying and sat down next to me on the bed. She had her phone in her hand too. Megan snorted. Are you kidding? Barbara lives for this kind of drama, but honestly, maybe it's good that everyone knows what's been going on. I wasn't so sure about that. On one hand, it felt good to finally have people believe me. On the other hand, I knew my parents were going to be furious, and I still had to figure out what I was going to do now. I had a job, but no place to live long term. I was still in high school, and despite everything, I missed my little siblings terribly. My phone rang. It was my dad calling. I looked at Megan, panic rising in my chest and my hands starting to shake slightly, but I knew I had to face them eventually. I took a deep breath and hit the accept button. I answered the call, bracing for the inevitable explosion. I wasn't disappointed. What the hell do you think you're doing? My dad's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Megan could hear it too, and her eyes widened. I didn't even get a chance to respond before he continued his rant. He told me I was dead to him, that I'd humiliated them in front of the entire family, and that I could forget about ever coming home. The whole time, I just sat there taking it, my eyes filling with tears again. When he finally ran out of steam, I managed to squeak out, I didn't mean for Aunt Barbara to tell everyone. It was a weak response, but it was all I could come up with. You stupid, ungrateful, he started again, but then I heard my mom in the background. She snatched the phone from him. Her voice was ice cold when she spoke. Julia, you've made your choice. Don't expect any support from us moving forward. Not for college, not for your phone bill, nothing. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even thought about all those practical things. My phone was still on their family plan. I had been counting on them at least helping with college. What about my stuff? I asked, my voice small. You took what you needed, my mom replied. Anything else we'll donate if you don't arrange to pick it up by the weekend. The call ended abruptly. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling completely overwhelmed. Megan put her arm around me and gave me a squeeze. Well, that sounded pleasant, she said, trying to lighten the mood. Don't worry about your stuff. We'll go get it tomorrow while they're at work. I nodded, still in shock. My parents had basically just disowned me over a part-time job at a coffee shop. What kind of parents did that? The next day, Megan called in sick to work, and we drove over to my parents' house. I still had my key, so we could get in without any problems. The house was quiet. My parents were at work, and my siblings were at school and daycare. It felt weird being back so soon, like I was breaking in instead of coming home. I quickly went to my room and started gathering things I hadn't been able to fit in my backpack the first time. My favorite books, more clothes, my laptop, and some photos of my siblings that I kept on my desk. While I was packing, Megan was in my parents' home office. I didn't know what she was doing, but I was focused on getting my stuff and getting out before anyone came home unexpectedly. When we left, Megan had a folder tucked under her arm. I asked her what it was, and she just shrugged and said she'd tell me later. We loaded my stuff into her car and drove back to her apartment. Back at her place, Megan finally showed me what she'd taken. It was a folder with my birth certificate, social security card, and some other important documents. She had also grabbed my parents' spare credit card that they kept for emergencies. You're going to need these, she explained, and they owe you for all the free babysitting. I was shocked. We can't use their credit card. That's stealing. Megan rolled her eyes. Relax. We're not going on a shopping spree, but you need clothes for work, a new phone plan, and some basic necessities. They owe you at least that much. I wasn't comfortable with it, but I also didn't see many options. I had $50 to my name and wouldn't get my first paycheck for 2 weeks, so I reluctantly agreed to use the card, but only for things I absolutely needed. We went to the mall that afternoon. I got a few black t-shirts and pants for my coffee shop job, a cheap prepaid phone, and some toiletries. All in all, we spent about $200 on the card. Still, I felt guilty about it, even though Megan assured me it was nothing compared to what a real babysitter would have cost them over the years. The next day was my first shift at the coffee shop. I was nervous, but excited to start earning my own money. The shop was called The Daily Grind. Super original, I know. The manager, Jamie, was pretty cool and patient with my training. I messed up a few orders and struggled with the espresso machine, but overall it wasn't too bad. When I got back to Megan's after my shift, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I hesitated before calling back, worried it might be my parents from a different phone. It wasn't. It was my little sister Emma using my brother's iPad. She was only 10 but somehow managed to memorize my number. She was crying, asking why I left and when I was coming home. It broke my heart to hear her so upset. I tried to explain in a way she would understand without bad-mouthing our parents. I told her I had a job now and needed to live closer to work, that I still loved her and my other siblings very much. She didn't really get it, but she made me promise to come see her soon. I promised, even though I had no idea how I would manage it. After that call, I was a mess again. Megan suggested we order pizza and watch dumb movies to take my mind off everything. It helped a little, but I couldn't stop thinking about my siblings and how much I missed them. The next few days fell into a routine. I would go to work, come back to Megan's, do homework, and repeat. I was exhausted all the time from trying to keep up with school while working nearly every day after classes, but at least I was making money now. About a week after everything went down, I got a text from my Aunt Barbara asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner at her house. She mentioned that my grandparents would be there, along with some other relatives who wanted to see me. I was hesitant. Was this some kind of trap? But Megan thought it would be good for me to see family who were supportive. So that Sunday, Megan drove me to Aunt Barbara's house. As soon as we walked in, my grandmother rushed over and pulled me into a tight hug. She was crying, which made me start crying too. I hadn't realized how much I needed a grandmother hug until that moment. The dinner was actually nice. No one pressured me to talk about my parents, but they made it clear they were there for me. My grandfather even slipped me an envelope before we left. When I opened it in the car, I found 5 crisp $100 bills inside. I tried to call him to say it was too much, but he wouldn't take it back. He said it was to help me get on my feet. That money was a huge relief. I immediately used some of it to get off my parents' phone plan and onto my own. I also opened a bank account without my parents' names on it, something Megan had suggested. Things were looking up, until they suddenly weren't. 2 weeks after I moved in with Megan, I came home from school to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a serious look on her face. "We need to talk," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. My heart sank. Was she kicking me out too? Where would I go? "Your mom called me today," Megan continued. "They've noticed the charges on their emergency credit card." I felt sick. I should have known they would check the statements or get a purchase alert. What appeared to be a spare card was actually one they monitored regularly. "What did she say?" I asked. "She accused us of theft and threatened to call the police if we don't return the card and pay back every cent," Megan replied with a grimace. "But here's the kicker. She also wants you to come home." I was shocked. "What? Why would they want me back after everything that happened?" Megan's expression turned grim. "Because their new babysitter quit after just 1 week. Apparently 4 kids under 10 is too much for most people. Who knew?" I laughed bitterly. Of course that was the reason. They didn't miss me. They missed their free childcare. "I'm not going back," I said firmly. "I can pay them back for the card from my paychecks, but I'm not going back to being their slave." Megan nodded, looking relieved. "That's what I told them. But they're pretty upset about the money. Your mom mentioned something about small claims court." I felt a flash of panic. Could they really take us to court? Would we get in trouble? I still had most of the $500 from my grandfather, so I could pay them back right away, but the whole thing left me feeling anxious and angry. The next day at school was awful. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept imagining police showing up to arrest me for credit card fraud or something. By lunchtime, I was a nervous wreck. My friend Casey noticed something was wrong and dragged me outside to the courtyard to talk. I ended up telling her everything. She was horrified by what my parents had done. "That's actual child neglect," she said. "They can't just throw you out because you got a job. You're still a minor." I hadn't really thought about it that way. I was so used to being treated like an adult at home that I forgot I was still legally a child. Casey's mom was a lawyer, and she suggested I talk to her about my options. I was hesitant. I didn't want to drag more people into my family drama, but Casey insisted, and after school she took me to her house. Mrs. Thompson, Casey's mom, listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, she had a lot of questions about specifics, dates, exactly what was said, who else knew about the situation. I answered as best I could. "Julia, what your parents did is not okay," she said finally. "They're legally obligated to provide for you until you're 18. They can't just kick you out because you won't babysit." She explained that I had options. I could file for emancipation, which would legally make me an adult before turning 18, or we could report my parents to Child Protective Services, which might force them to take me back or place me in foster care. Neither option sounded great. Emancipation would mean taking on full adult responsibilities when I was already struggling to balance school and work. And CPS might take my siblings away too, which I definitely didn't want. Mrs. Thompson must have seen my hesitation. She suggested a third option, having another relative petition for temporary guardianship. That way, I could legally stay with someone like Megan or my grandparents without my parents getting in trouble. I thanked her for the advice and promised to think about it. On the way back to Megan's, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was my little brother Alex, using my dad's old phone. He said my parents were fighting all the time now, and the house was a mess without me there. My heart ached reading his messages. I missed him and my other siblings so much. When I got back to Megan's, I had a surprise waiting for me. My grandparents were there, sitting in the living room with serious expressions. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. "Don't look so worried," my grandmother said, patting the couch next to her. "We just want to talk about what happens next." They had heard about the credit card situation from my mom, but unlike my parents, they weren't angry. They were concerned. They thought I shouldn't be working so much while trying to finish high school. They wanted me to focus on my education. My grandfather cleared his throat. "We have a proposal for you. We'd like you to come live with us until you graduate. We have plenty of room, and you won't have to work so many hours to support yourself." I was stunned. My grandparents lived in a nice house about 30 minutes from my school. Moving in with them would solve so many problems, but I was worried about imposing on them. They were in their 70s and probably didn't want a teenager disrupting their retirement. "We've already discussed it with your parents," my grandmother added, seeing my hesitation. "They've agreed, as long as you visit them and the kids every weekend." Of course they had a condition. They still wanted access to my free babysitting services, but 1 day a week was a lot better than every day. And living with my grandparents would be a huge improvement over couch surfing at Megan's, as much as I appreciated her taking me in. So I agreed. That weekend, I moved my stuff to my grandparents' house. They had converted their home office into a bedroom for me. It was small but cozy, with a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf. My grandmother had even bought new bedding and curtains to make it feel like my own space. The first night there, I slept better than I had in weeks. There was something calming about being in their house, away from the chaos of my parents' home, but still with family who cared about me. The next morning was